Okay. So you're saying you moved back to that. So how long are you with Adobe then?
So I was independent for a long time, and then in 2007 I joined Day Software in Basel, Switzerland, and they got acquired by Adobe in 2010. So it's in total Day plus Adobe. That's 13 years.
Oh.
That's a long time, yes.
And
It's a pretty long time.
Yeah, it's pretty long. And if I informed correctly, you also for several years now attendee on the adaptTo, right? So do you remember your first talk you gave on the adaptTo?
I have a bad memory for that kind of thing. Unfortunately, it's often embarrassing. You know, I do nice things with people. I go skiing or sailing, and then 1 year later, I meet them and say, "Hey, Bertrand, you remember we did that?" And say, "Oh, sorry, I don't remember." Often it comes back the next day, so I don't remember which was my first talk at adaptTo, but it was not unfortunately at the very first conference. But I've been doing a number of talks on a bit far out topics, you know, experimental stuff. That's what I like to do usually. Propose a topic that's very experimental, and I think at least once it didn't work. But yeah, I've been doing lots of talks in the kind of bleeding edge, I would say,
Cool.
department.
Cool. And you said you go hiking or sailing. What else do you do on your free time?
Way too many things. So I'm a cyclist, but I don't do like competition or anything. But I use my bike, my cycling electric bike actually, to commute a lot. I do about 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers a year.
Oh wow!
And we have a boat here in port, so we go sailing a lot, a small sailboat.
Cool.
My sister-in-law is manager of a mountain hut, so we also do some hiking. And I like to build things. My father was a carpenter, so
nice.
I'm sometimes a bad carpenter in my free time.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm a carpenter in my free time as well. So.
Oh, great! It's very rewarding compared to what we do. You know, doing something in the evening you finished and it moves and it works. That's great.
Yeah, definitely. Cool.
It's closer to the real world than doing all the abstract architectural stuff.
Yeah,
certainly.
and creating things with your hands is pretty satisfying, at least for me. Yeah.
On the other hand, what's cool in our work is you know, the multiplying factor. When you see, there's n big sites which use code that I wrote, that's very gratifying as well. But it takes much longer to see these kinds of rewards.
Yeah, definitely. Cool.
So, as you've been saying, you're moving back into AM sites, and you've been working on the GraphQL thing, I think, as you mentioned it a bit. So, I guess you've been pretty much involved in all the cloud services set up as well, and even I know it's a difficult topic to ask on, but how do you feel about it? How do you feel? I think it's a question which is stated by many people today in the adaptTo. This is why we have so many talks about it, and it's probably interesting also to see whether you're also interested, or what is your opinion on it, due to the extent you can tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've not been involved in the core of the move to the cloud. So I'm more involved in, for example, trying to find out which services we can take out of AM to make it even more cloud friendly. And quite frankly, I would say when I look at that, it feels a bit like magic, because I started with Day Software when we created CQ5, which is still it's the core, or it's still the same product, you could say. Okay, it's been evolving a lot, but it's still the same fundamentals. And if you have told me at the time that we'd run it that way, I would probably not have believed you, or it would have happened late at night in a bar, And today this thing is working, and it's really amazing. And I think our colleagues who did all the infrastructure DevOps related work, it's really amazing because it was not designed for that initially. And it has challenges, of course, because in some places there's a bit of an impedance mismatch by running that on the cloud. But I think we've made great progress on that, and it's the automation that's behind it, I think is really amazing. And it's cool because now we can evolve Sling. What I'm doing with around GraphQL is in mind of having better HTTP APIs on that stuff. And so I think now we can evolve Sling to fit more in that model, and that's really cool, I think.
Certainly. I think it's two ways. It's now by moving into the cloud, making that decision, it pushes a lot of the product itself and modernize it in many ways.
Yeah.
And
modernizing while still keeping the same product spirit, I would say. And that's a big challenge, and I think we're doing quite good on that.
Yeah, we're pretty much interested in all the talks upcoming later on today, and I think over the next few days coming. Certainly. So, I mean, as you've been always saying, you've been pushing a lot in the architecture. Is there anything you would wish to see upcoming? As you're the person who could actually talk out wishes without having to make them real. Being in that position.
That's a theory because it's a big organization, it's a big product, so it's hard to say, I want it to be like that. So it takes a lot of convincing internally as well which means that when something comes out, it's usually pretty good because we had to convince a lot of folks to get there. So I really think we need to push further on removing services from AM and turning them into cloud services. A big thing that we could do is in terms of presentation, the rendering code, which is still currently runs inside of AM. And today we have ways to do that differently, either in serverless, Adobe I/O runtime based on Apache OpenWhisk, you could run rendering there. In some cases, it makes sense to do rendering on the client. And today, one thing that I've been also looking at is doing rendering on the edge. In most CDN providers today are offering ways to run code at the edge. And I think running rendering and personalization code there could be really interesting. And it's just the beginnings of that currently.
That sounds really interesting for the upcoming time. Yeah, definitely.
One interesting fact Stefan dropped in the chat. So your first talk at the adaptTo was 7 years ago, and it was about automated self-testing and health check of live Sling instances. So
yes, right. Yes. I remember it very well now. So it was the beginning of the Sling health checks, which I think that's one of the designs that I think we can be collectively proud of. So I was heavily involved in this design, but by far not the only one. And we had great feedback from other Sling committers. And I think that's one of the very solid designs that we have in Sling. And that's as we were saying, years down the line, you notice, oh wow, this. Yeah. I think we did this right. So it's very gratifying. Cool. Especially when it's done as a team, you can't say, "Oh, it's my design."
Yeah, definitely.
It was really group effort.
Yeah. Speaking of group effort, I guess you're pretty in open source in the open source community. So I'm really love open source. And what do you think? What is the hottest repository people should dive into right now in the open source world? What do you think?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a very difficult question. And I think that's one of the nice things that you can do. You can do everything. This week is also ApacheCon, the Apache conference. And tomorrow at ApacheCon, I'm presenting a talk called Open Source Changes the World. In all modesty, because the thing is that open source is everywhere. It's in your fridge, it's in my e-bike probably. And I think that's one of the very nice things. The thing that gets me technically excited currently is really around, as I was saying, around the edge, what you can do with WebAssembly, which is a very nice runtime, which is safe by design. And that's really where I'm focusing a lot of my discovering energy currently. So I cannot name one Web3 tree, but I think what goes on around the edge and putting, shipping content to CDN so it can be very close to the users, I think we're going to see a lot of change in that in the next few years. And it goes together with Internet of Things, where you can also benefit from the edge. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if the interest moves to more, doing more stuff on the edge in the near future.
Yeah, cool.
So many interesting talks for the future upcoming from your side. So I guess.
Yeah. I usually have too many ideas, so it's hard to select. And my main problem in my work is focusing. I tend to get interested by too many things, so that's a good challenge to have. But then you also need to be concrete from time to time.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Definitely.
I think one thing still in here, and probably also due to the actual time which we have with Corona in there, it's probably also interesting to see how's it actually influencing your work.
Corona?
Yeah.
For myself, I don't think it has changed much because I work remotely anyway. So it's on one hand, I miss the travel even more because I used to do lots of remote work and some travel. So now, obviously, like everybody, that's difficult. In Switzerland, we are lucky, and I think we also have good government. That means practically it's not too bad. I did a bit more music. I also do music in my free time. I did a bit more music because there was more free time initially when we couldn't meet people. I think the way I would say it has influenced me. I'm also very interested in the open source driven collaboration techniques, asynchronous decision making and all that stuff. And I think the pandemic has helped us refine that and see what really works in that area. And I'm very excited about this conference because it's the first one since the pandemic began, which has been designed around this. And it's very interesting to see how we can replicate the Hallways conference, which is, for me, has always been the best value. So in terms of concrete changes, I would say the focus on asynchronous work and decision making, which is great. And the way conferences evolve, which is great from a planet point of view, I would say, if we travel less, that's good for the planet. That's a bit harder for us because I would like to go and have drinks with you guys later today. We won't be able to do that physically, unfortunately.
Yes, you're right. It's been changing quite a bit in terms of traveling, and I think lots of companies have reduced their office spaces and whatever already. Yeah, so I can see that at my own company as well. We have also this kind of policies, but yes, personal contact can probably it's valued then slightly more afterwards. If we ever meet up in person again, it will be far more detailed contact and far more deep contact as if you just meet up once normally. If we had met too many people in person, probably.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. I always said for me, working remotely is much easier if I have met the person once in real life. Like we have lunch or we have a beer or something. Like you, Lars, now I feel like I'm meeting you because we have met personally in the past. And for people that have never met, it's harder.
That's true.
I think over video, I don't succeed in creating that type of contact of bound maybe that we create in person. So I hope that once we can travel again, I hope we'll find a good balance between meeting sometimes but not traveling too often to keep the planet in good shape.
Yeah, hopefully then we met in person next year.
I hope, yes.
I hope so, yeah. And I guess as time passing by, maybe one last question. How do I announce your name, your last name correctly?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. I lived 30 years ago. I lived 1 year in California doing a music school, and it was terrible having to explain your name every time. Oh, that's the last name. Ah, that's the first name. Oh, it's fun. Yeah. No, it's not fun. So my last name is Delacrétaz.
Oh,
That's how you pronounce it in the French-speaking Switzerland. If it was France, you would say Delacrétaz. You would say the ending Z. In Switzerland, we don't. So it's Bertrand Delacrétaz. It's how you pronounce it. I'm used to lots of creative ways, and I learned that I have family in Australia, and my Australian aunt told me when you book at a restaurant, you just say Del. You know, I want to book a table for Del. Then you show up, you say, my name is Del, it works. Otherwise, you spend way too long explaining it.
Totally understand, but it's a really nice sounding name. So
it's fairly unique. You know, it's a small family, so that's useful on the internet. If you search for Bertrand Delacrétaz, in general, you find me. Cool. I don't think there's another one. And that's useful on the web, maybe. John Smith is probably a bit harder for John Smith.
True to say. Right. So thank you very much for your time, Bertrand, and hopefully meet up later on in any of the launches or whatever, and enjoy the adaptTo, this year's adaptTo 2020, and enjoy your time at home with your family.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good time. Thanks for
your work.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.